After weeks of hectic and hard-fought negotiations, India and the United States of America have almost finalized a mini-trade deal, while both sides continue to work on the larger bilateral trade agreement that will be finalized later this year. The deal, which is set to be announced soon by both countries, will involve concessions on the critical issues of agriculture and dairy products by both sides. The mini-deal is unlikely to see any reduction in the baseline tariff announced by American President Donald Trump on 2nd April of 10% on all goods exported from India to the US. However, the additional tariffs of roughly 26% announced by him are set to be reduced or taken out completely as a part of this agreement. New Delhi has agreed to specific demands from Washington to include certain agricultural products and dairy which are not produced commonly in India as a part of this deal. Other areas that are set to see tariff cuts on New Delhi's end will likely include American automobiles. US President Donald Trump has publicly criticized India's high tariffs on foreign-made automobiles. A negotiating team from the Ministry of Commerce and Industry reached the US earlier on Monday for meetings with their counterparts. Rajesh Agarwal, India's chief negotiator and special secretary in the same ministry, is reportedly set to arrive in Washington on Wednesday morning for the final leg of negotiations. The final announcement of the deal depends on Washington and Trump. So far, the White House has maintained that the deal between the two countries is nearing the finishing line. The mini-trade deal has been under negotiation since Trump first announced his intention to impose additional tariffs on a number of countries that the US has a trade deficit with. India exports roughly US $77 billion worth of goods to the US, importing around $42 billion from the world's largest economy. In February of this year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Trump had announced during the former's two-day visit to the US that the first tranche of a larger bilateral trade deal would be announced by fall 2025. However, the impetus for this mini-deal grew as the US administration decided to impose tariffs on nearly every country in the world, with Trump looking to cut America's trade deficit. He has consistently railed against India's tariffs on goods from the US. The deal is unlikely to include any language on genetically modified crops, which is said to be a red line for India. However, New Delhi in the past has demurred from signing any agreement that could impact its agriculture and dairy sectors. For example, in the ongoing negotiations with the European Union for the free trade agreement, the two sides have arrived at an understanding to leave dairy outside of the purview of the final deal. But any change in India's position on this with the US could impact the future of the EU deal. US Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick has pushed India to open its agricultural sector to US products, asserting that the sector cannot remain closed. He has held multiple meetings with India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal. Facing pushback on global tariffs, Trump had agreed to pause the additional tariffs for 3 months in April. The deadline for the pause elapsed on 9th of July. He, however, announced that nations will be given a further extension till 1st August to negotiate a mini-deal with the US. In the meantime, Trump has sent a number of letters to foreign leaders indicating likely additional tariffs in the event that no deal is struck by 1st of August. India has not received a letter yet. In a letter to the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen last week, Trump said that the US will impose a 30% tariff on all goods coming from the EU, independent of all existing sectoral tariffs on aluminium, steel, and automobiles already in place. In a letter to Ottawa, Trump has threatened to impose 35% as a tariff on goods exported by Canada to the US. The deal with the US would be the second major trade agreement for India this year. Modi is set to travel to the United Kingdom on 23rd July to sign the free trade agreement with London. The other deal New Delhi hopes to complete by the end of 2025 is the comprehensive trade agreement with the European Union. That is all for me today. For more such news and analysis, subscribe below.